Hello, welcome. This is Fledgling God, Book 3, Chapter 2, and it's called Arrival. So if you remember last time, Jason had said goodbye to everybody, and Annabeth had pushed him and Sandy through the portal, and they have now arrived in the new place with their luggage. So we ended up in a gazebo, which wasn't what I expected at all. Granted, it was a huge gazebo, but I thought we were going into a house. It was beautiful though, with hanging ferns, comfy benches, and thousands of little twinkling lights. Some sort of classical music was playing in the background, and I looked closer and realized the lights were actually flowers. There were leafy vines growing up all over the structure, and growing on those vines were thousands of white flowers. In the middle of each of those flowers was a bright twinkling light. It was the afternoon when we'd left, but here it was nighttime, and all the little lights made the place feel festive and fun. I took a quick look around to see over 100 people in different groups standing around chatting. Before I could take in more than that, a kind-faced woman came over and greeted us. "Hello, and welcome to House Atac." She clapped her hands together in a strange-looking pose and gave us a small bow. Sandy bowed back, and I followed her lead. "Kindly step away from the portal so that the rest of your party may follow." She gestured in front of us, and we both stepped forward, trailing our luggage behind us. We knew there wasn't anyone else coming through, but the woman made it so easy to follow her directions. The portal gave a small pop and disappeared. A look of surprise flashed across the woman's face. She looked at us, looked at where the portal should have been, then looked back at us again. "I'm sorry, there appears to be some sort of mistake," she stammered. "I've never had a portal close so quickly before. Normally it stays open for several minutes and we have plenty of time." "It's okay," Sandy said soothingly. "We were the only ones that needed to come here. Since we had stepped through, the portal was welcome to close whenever it wanted." "It's just the two of you?" She sounded shocked, like she couldn't believe only two people from a house would attend a gathering. Sandy nodded. The woman looked at us for a minute, unsure of what to do. We had certainly thrown her out of her normal routine. "I'm sorry," she said. "I've just never had this happen before. Getting an invitation to the gathering is highly coveted, and there are only 20 open spots for each house. These spots are always filled, and sometimes we've even had people try to sneak in as stowaways. That never works, of course, but still, we have those that try. Having 18 empty invitations, though, that is just unheard of. If it helps, we would have enjoyed having a few more people with us, but they had to stay behind and defend the house," Sandy said with a sigh. "Defend the house?" she echoed. Then something seemed to click with her. "By any chance, are you from House Louisville?" "That we are," Sandy said. "I'm Sandy, the head of household, and this is Jason." "Oh, well, it is certainly nice to meet both of you." She did her little hand thing and bowed to both of us again. "I am Oida, and I'm very happy to welcome you. Since you are such a new house and under attack too, it makes perfect sense that only a few of you could come. I'm pretty sure neither of you have been to a gathering before?" She gave us a questioning look. Sandy shook her head. "Well, I'm so glad you are here. You are going to love it. Being at your first gathering is something special." She gave a wistful sigh. "It's like falling in love for the first time. You will forever remember these next few days." It seemed Oeda was a bit of a romantic. One second. Normally, I'd say I was a realist, but with Tyler, the sweetest, hottest incubus ever, But Tyler, the sweetest, hottest incubus ever, was now my boyfriend, so I was ready to swing to the romantic side and see the world through rose-colored glasses. "Now come with me. We'll get in line and I'll get you oriented." She led us toward the other side of the gazebo. I thought the other people were standing around in no particular order, but as we moved along, I realized they were grouped together, with the groups forming a line. I also found out the music wasn't a recording, it was an actual string quartet. 2 men and 2 women were dressed like they'd stepped right off the stage of My Fair Lady. We used this gazebo as a load-in location for 2 reasons, Ayoda continued as she walked. The main reason is for organization. The caller at the front of the line spaces out the guests so they can walk to the house without tripping over each other. And when they reach the house, they have plenty of time to get organized and disperse before the next group arrives. It's a 2-stage system, but it works well. We reached the end of the line and I got my first view of where we were headed. My jaw dropped. House Atac was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was also enormous. It had all the grandeur of Biltmore Estate, but at least 50 times bigger. It looked like a fairy tale with columns and arches and peaks and balconies and gargoyles. It was lit up like an oasis of light, and it seemed to promise romance and mystery and happiness. It was like a beautiful woman dressed in her finest jewels, promising both a stately elegance and a body good time. I felt drawn to it, as if it was magnetic. I finally looked away to see Ayoda smiling at me fondly. She is beautiful, no. Oh, yes, I breathed. Your house is lovely. She laughed, a happy, welcoming laugh. She was obviously proud of her house and loved showing it off. I looked over at Sandy as she was having the same reaction as I was. House Chicago is big, and I never thought I'd see anything to beat it, but this is just out of this world, she said. Literally, I injected. Sandy laughed. Yep, it's in its own realm, so literally it's out of this world. Ayoda smiled politely, but I don't think she got the humor. So what is the second reason, Sandy asked. Do what? Oh, the second reason we came through the portal to the gazebo instead of directly into the house. Vanity, Ayoda said. These houses like to be, the house likes to be looked at. She laughed. It does make sense, though. Architecture is there to be admired, and if you don't start your journey at a distance, how can you proudly appreciate the artistry of it all? One sec. The view was amazing, and I was glad I'd gotten to appreciate the majesty of the house before we were inside. I had a whole new perspective of what we were getting into. It's not just vanity on the part of the house, Ayoda continued. It also gives the guest houses a chance to be seen by the others and have their group moment in the spotlight. The procession started out as a simple tradition, but since then it's become much more than that. Now it has become a bit of a contest to see which house can outdo the others. It starts with the caller. That's the person at the exit of the gazebo. He announces the name of your house, and that is usually when the group unveils their first surprise. Then you wind through the front garden until you reach the house. The path is over a mile long, so you have plenty of time to check everyone out and appreciate all the time and artistry that has gone into their procession. About 3/4 of the way to the house is the oval. It is normally used as a small outdoor gathering for a meeting or a concert. For tonight, it is a perfect place to stop and show off your skills. Keep an eye on it and you'll see all kinds of interesting things. Since this is your first time here, don't worry too much about creating something yourself. Just enjoy the show and get ideas for next time. Oh, it looks like the caller's getting ready to announce a house. Let's watch. She pulled us to the side so we could get a better view. The caller was talking to someone in a group at the front of the gazebo. He stepped back and waited for a moment. The group whispered among themselves, but it was hard to see what they were doing, to see if they were doing anything at all, as the figures were dressed in black. Finally, they finished and nodded to the caller. They were ready. House Atac is proud to welcome House Lima. The caller's voice boomed out, and a soft white light flew up in the air from the group. It hovered about 20 feet in the air and then started spinning. As it spun, it started separating out colors. Then the whole ball whipped apart, and suddenly the air was filled with beautiful parrots. They had white beaks and bright red heads. The red turned into different colors before finishing in an electric blue on the tips of their wings and the tails. They were stunning. Definitely the most beautiful birds I'd seen in real life. They flew overhead for a moment, calling to each other with harsh cries. Then they flew down, and each one settled onto a member of House Lima. As soon as they did, the black outfit disappeared and they exploded in color. Their coloring echoed the birds, with white caps, red capes, and green shirts fading into electric blue pants. The group then turned and glided off down the path. And I do mean glided. It looked like they were floating on an invisible stream. It was an impressive display of power and artistry, and there was a round of applause from those of us still at the gazebo. As soon as they moved off, everyone went back to chatting, so I took the opportunity to ask Aota a few questions. How many houses are there? 2,156, Aota said. There used to be less, but with the world population growing the way it is, the house has been adding a new branch every 20 years or so. So what makes a new house appear, I asked, and who determines where it's going to be? That is a good question. The truth is, we don't know exactly. The house is alive, so it grows where it wants, when it wants. Aota shrugged. The theory is that the house grows whenever there is a need. Sometimes it seems like it grows with the population. Sometimes it opens a new house, and sometimes it opens a house where there is a new disaster. A natural disaster. This isn't always true, though. Take your house, for example. Louisville is the largest city in Kentucky, but it doesn't rank very high when you consider all the cities in the world. There also hasn't been any sort of natural disaster there since the flood of 1937. So why did it open a branch in Louisville a year and a half ago? Nobody knows. That was interesting. If the house grew where it was needed, why did it show up in Louisville? Why was it to stop the Louisville Mages, or was it something bigger than that? You said it opened a branch, so are all the houses connected, I asked. Oh yes, all the houses are connected, just like branches of a tree. Some of the houses are very big and have been around for thousands of years. Some of them are only a few hundred years old. The theory is that they all have the same source. It is said that somewhere there is a rune that powers and guides the house. Oh, you mean the All rune, I asked? She gave me an odd look. I've heard of that, but most people consider it a myth. Runes are complicated things, and there is no way that one rune can encompass everything. It's an interesting idea and a fun story to tell younger supernaturals, but no senior mage that I know of actually believes it exists. I shared a quick glance with Sandy. We both knew it was real, all right. If it was supposed to be a secret, though, I wasn't going to go around talking about it. As for the idea that a rune is the source of all the houses, that is just a theory. Actually, I don't know you'd call it a theory, because that would mean there's some evidence to support an assumption. As far as I know, there's no evidence of that either. This could just be a project for a mage that it's thousands of years old, sort of like Realm Lord Atac is for House Atac. This sounded very confusing, although she said it like this was common knowledge. I don't understand, I said. I've never been to a realm before, so I'm new to all this. I'm sure you've explained this a lot, but could you give me the beginner version? Sure, she smiled. A realm is a place that is connected to Earth, but it's a totally different space. Each realm is its own contained world. It can be small, like a personal realm, all the way up to a huge place that are the size of continents. Each realm can have its own rules, and they can be very different from what you are used to. For example, it is always night here, and there are very few animals or insects. In other realms, it can be completely different, with a huge number of animals and plants. Days don't have to be 24 hours. There can be only 1 or 2 seasons, and even something as basic as gravity might be different. Realms sound a lot like different dimensions, or multiverses like they have in the comics. She indicated that realms were self-contained and smaller than Earth, so a different universe wasn't the best way to think about it. Maybe a pocket dimension? From what we know, there are two different types of realms, natural and conjured. Natural realms form where there is a catastrophic event on Earth that takes a lot of life. It takes something really big like a volcano or earthquake, and it has to affect a lot of living things like plants and animals to generate enough magic to form a realm. When the realm forms, it is usually a snapshot of the world before the tragedy happened. Natural realms are usually unstable, and they can last anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple hundred years before they fall apart. Occasionally, though, something happens to stabilize the realm, and it lasts much longer than that. Interesting. I wonder if there was a realm filled with dinosaurs? That would be awesome. Of course, that would be millions of years old, and the realm had probably fallen apart by now. I wondered if all this was new to Sandy. I glanced over at her, but she looked like she was only half listening. I guess she already knew all this. Aoda was still on a roll, though. It seemed like she liked having an eager listener. Conjured realms, on the other hand, are completely sourced by a powerful mage. I have no idea how they do it, but somehow they use magic to split apart space itself and form a whole new realm. Since they form the realm, they get to set it up however they like. Usually, maintaining a realm takes a lot more time and energy than one person can provide, no matter how powerful they are. So a realm lord will recruit sponsors to finish the realm and help with its upkeep. So that's what happened here, I asked. Yes, she nodded. Lord Atac created this realm a couple thousand years ago. It's rumored that he was working on something at the time that was sensitive to light. He started out working underground but ran into problems with the temperature and the moisture. So he changed his plans, gathered his power, and made a realm. So this place is like its own personal workshop, I said. That's one way of looking at it, she nodded. Is Lord Atac still here? As far as I know, he is. I haven't seen him, of course, but some of the really old mages say he still talks to them occasionally. Rumor has it he lives on the top floor of the house, and he uses the mountain as his own workshop. I looked past the house for the first time and saw a huge mountain range in the back. I was used to the hills of Kentucky, but this was enormous. It looked like something out of an Ansel Adams picture. Whatever he was working on, it must have required a lot of room. So how did the house get here, I asked. Lord Atac has always been a house guest, she said, even when he was a fresh new mage. Once he made the realm, he asked the house to grow a branch here, and he paid the cost himself. His idea was that this house would be a place of healing for new supernaturals and a place of experimentation and reflection for older supernaturals. She gestured to the left side of the house. There is a whole section dedicated to new mages who are experiencing emotional and physical trauma. Waker moments can be nasty things, and the way new mages are treated by the supernatural community can be pretty awful too. If a mage is accepted by the house, but they are too damaged to be part of regular society, then the house will send them here to get the help they need. That sounds pretty amazing, I said. Lord Atac survived and got very powerful, but he never forgot it was the house that kept him safe. We stood for a moment looking at the magnificent house. It was more than just a pretty place. It was a way to honor the All Rune for creating a home and to create safety and healing for lots of new supernaturals. There was still so much to learn yet, but maybe someday I'd be powerful enough to make a difference too. I certainly hope so. Another woman gestured at Oeda and she turned to us. I have to go and get ready for the next arrivals. Just stay in line, wait for the caller to announce you before heading out, and don't go too fast. You'll be fine. Once you get to the house, just look for someone with a badge if you need anything. She tapped her necklace. A large purple star outlined in gold. Actually, I guess it was more like a lanyard, not a necklace. I looked over at the other woman. She had a purple star as well, but it was pinned to her dress. At least I knew what to look for now. It has been wonderful talking to you, she said warmly. She really was a nice person. She seemed like a tamer version of Annabeth. Here is my contact information. Hello? Here is my contact information if you run into any problems and can't find a volunteer. Also, if you want to, just drop me a note afterwards and let me know how you like it. You both are going to have so much fun. She held out the back of her right wrist, and Sandy reached over and tapped the back of her wrist against it. There was a soft glow, and when Sandy withdrew her hand, Oeda offered her wrist to me, then she paused. You don't have a bank stamp. She looked at Sandy, then looked back at me, then looked back at Sandy again. I was guessing this was a problem. The other woman gestured at Oeda again, but she raised one finger like, give me a minute. No, he doesn't have a bank stamp, Sandy said. He's only been a supernatural. For a couple months now. The bank usually won't initiate anyone until they're at least a decade old. Oeda looked at me again, like really looked at me. He's a spark, Oeda said. He's a spark, Sandy confirmed. They were talking about me like I wasn't there, but I didn't mind. I was learning new stuff, or at least new questions to ask. I'd never heard the term spark before. Sandy had mentioned a bank stamp a few hours earlier, but I hadn't had time to learn anything about that yet either. I'll bet anything that you are the youngest person ever invited to the gathering, Oeda said to me, was talking to me again. Still, records were made to be broken, and I'm glad I was here to see it. Without bank access, you are going to run into problems. You won't have access to the map, so it'll be difficult for you to get around. You won't have the schedule of events or any of the general update messages. The biggest problem, though, is that you won't be able to understand anyone else unless they're speaking in English. The easiest thing for you is to always be with someone you trust. They can help you get around and interpret as needed. I'd also suggest sticking to the talks that are given in English. There are going to be over 100 languages here, but at least English is a popular one. I'm also going to do one more thing for you. She trailed off and her eyes focused on something only she could see. She made a few gestures in the air and then looked back at us. They're all done, she smiled brightly. I sent out a general notification to the entire house. They now know that you are here, how many of you are attending, and that your party consists of a spark with no bank access. They will help keep an eye out for you and provide any assistance needed. Remember, we are always here to help. She tapped her purple star again. She gave us her hand pose and bowed again. We bowed back. Then she hurried off, I assumed to get ready for the next group to arrive. It sounded like I was the baby of the gathering, like they were going to have to keep an extra eye on me to make sure I didn't get lost or do anything stupid. I didn't like the feelings that came with that. I was used to taking care of myself. I was reliable and resourceful, and I was here to help support Sandy, not have her take care of me. I stopped and took a deep breath. It felt good, so I did it again, letting all the frustration out. I channeled Annabeth and just accepted the situation. Oeda was probably right. I'm sure I was the youngest supernatural here, and I didn't have the bank stamp and maps and translation and whatever else. I'd make it work. I always did. So what is this bank stamp thing? I asked Sandy. I'm sorry about that, Sandy replied. She sounded a little frustrated too. In our rush to get here, it never occurred to me that you don't have a bank stamp yet. It isn't something you've needed up to this point. I just never thought about how it hampered you once you got here. Don't worry, we'll stick together and make it work. I'm sure we will, I said. We've been through a lot worse than this before, and we made it work very well. I put on my best cheerful smile. I wasn't going to let Sandy get upset on my account. You mentioned a bank stamp back at the house, but we haven't had a chance to chat about that yet. What is that exactly? The bank stamp is just a magical imprint that lets you access all the functions of the bank, Sandy said. Okay, that was nice to know, but I could have figured that out on my own. I was ready to go with a lot more questions, but Sandy just laughed and held up her hand. I can see by the look on your face you need a lot more than that. Let me give you an overview of the bank and see if that answers all the questions I see brewing inside that curious head of yours. The bank started thousands and thousands of years ago. Legend has it there were two brothers who were both supernaturals and both founded large and powerful schools. The schools pioneered a lot of the basic mage techniques that are still in use today. They were the first ones to put runes into charms and trade them with each other. It didn't take long before the current system of bartering broke down and resulted in some serious fights. To keep the peace, the brothers came together and made the most basic unit of magical currency, the pearl. A pearl looks like a real pearl, but it's a solid piece of magic. It's formed from the caster's magic and has their exact color and saturation. Once mages found out they could not only make pearls but absorb them too, it started a whole market for trading. They discovered that absorbing a pearl that was the same color as their own made for very little contamination. Finding someone that had their exact hue was difficult, so there needed to be a way to store pearls until the right buyer came along. The brothers got together again and created the first version of the bank. At first, all it did was verify that the pearls were the right size and rate their color and hue. As you can imagine, supernaturals already started to figure out how to cheat the system by making the pearls slightly smaller and less dense. The bank put a stop to that, as well as adding a color cataloging system. After a while, it started acting like a real bank. You could now pay for things with your bank stamp rather than carrying around actual pearls. This dramatically reduced the amount of robberies, and soon everyone wanted a bank stamp regardless of what school they belonged to. From there, they started adding on other services like communications, entertainment, ownership, tournament rankings, and personal rankings. In a very real way, the supernatural world had debit cards, Google Translate, YouTube, and Messenger as far back as the Roman times. In some ways, that sounds pretty awesome, I said thoughtfully. On the other hand, social media is used for scamming people and spreading propaganda. How has the supernatural world dealt with those problems? Well, for one thing, you can't pretend to be somebody else. Your magic signature is unique, so all messages and correspondence have to come from you directly. If you scan somebody, they will know exactly who did it and hunt you down. If they are powerful enough, they will probably kill you and take everything you own. The other thing is only people can own things and send messages. So you can't get scammed by some company or some faceless person on the other side of the world. If you buy something, you buy it from a person. If it isn't what you want, you take that up with them directly. That keeps a lot of the bureaucracy and corruption out of the system. On the other hand, it makes it a lot like a schoolyard where the biggest person gets what they want. But that is a whole different discussion. This all sounds pretty awesome, I said. So why doesn't everybody get a bank stamp right away? Power, Sandy said simply. The link takes power to work, and brand new supernaturals are just getting their feet underneath them. They don't have any power to spare. That's partially why I wasn't checking my messages. The bank stamp powered down on its own while I was recovering. Once I got enough power to wake up, I still didn't want to activate the stamp. After we got married, I had all the power I needed, but then I had other things on my mind. Her eyes got a faraway look and a smile crossed her face. I'm sure John had kept her occupied with things other than checking her messages. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. One of the groups had made it to the Oval, so we paused our discussion to see what they would do. It didn't seem like much in the beginning. They pulled out some instruments that looked like long reeds and began to play them. Some blew into them and some used them as light percussion. It sounded natural and earthy and reminded me of a soft breeze on a summer day. That must have been what they were intending, because long stalks of wheat started growing out of the ground. I was pretty sure I was seeing an illusion, but it looked amazingly real. They kept playing, and soon they were surrounded by a thick field of grain that rippled in an invisible breeze. Then most of them stopped, and they started beating the wheat with their sticks. The golden grains flew up in the air and swirled around them. The stalks disappeared, and the grains settled on the ground all around them. The music changed. Now it was deep and rough, and a giant stone wheel appeared. Some of the mages started chanting, and the stone wheel turned, rolling around them. At first I wasn't sure what they were doing, but then the wheel gradually became covered in white, and I realized they were grinding the grains into flour. Next, a thick wooden table grew out of the ground, and they started mixing dough and rolling it around. They formed the dough into round balls, and then the table turned into a fire brick oven. I'd enjoyed the visuals and the music up to this point. I thought it was nice, but I wasn't blown away by it until the smell of fresh baked bread started wafting through the air. It smelled so good. My mouth was watering, and suddenly I was hungry. They pulled the bread out of the oven, and the loaves had beautiful golden crusts. They were thick and round and very different from the bread that was normally available in the grocery store. The head mage tore his loaf in two and raised it to the sky. The rich smell of fresh bread intensified. He certainly had everybody's attention now. Then slowly and deliberately he took a huge bite. A look of pure bliss crossed his face as he chewed. The rest of the housemates tore open their bread and started eating too. For a moment, everyone present seemed to stop and just watch them eat. I was betting there wasn't a person there that didn't want some fresh bread right now. With a wave of his hand, the brick oven disappeared and the instruments vanished. Still munching their bread, the house moved out of the oval and continued on the way. I had no idea what house they belonged to, but they had certainly made an impression. That was amazing. Sandy looked like she'd just finished watching the best Netflix series ever. She was slightly leaning towards the oval, taking deep breaths to catch the last of the scent. Now I really want to do some baking. I'm sure you do, I laughed, and I want to be there to taste everything you make. I thought about the dinners and the good times I'd had with Sandy and our crew. I've really missed you, I said, and gave her a big hug. The house just hasn't been the same with you and John gone. I've missed you too, Sandy said sincerely. I'm sure the gathering will be a wonderful adventure and we'll learn all sorts of things, but I'm really looking forward to just going home and getting back to normal. We stood there for a moment together, enjoying the cool night breeze and the live music. The caller introduced the next house, Urugmi. I had looked it up on Google and don't exactly know how to say it. And this time, a freaking big train pulled up. It was very modern looking, with a bullet-shaped front and a body made of glass. Actually, it probably wasn't glass, but it was clear like that. The tracks formed in front of it and vanished behind it. The sides shimmered and house members stepped on board. Then the train slowly took off down the winding garden path. It was neat as hell. The line moved forward and we shuffled along with it. I was taking in all the different languages and outfits of the other house around us when something occurred to me. I just realized that we are the only people here with luggage, I told Sandy quietly. She took a quick look around. You're right. Surely they have clothes and stuff like we do. Do you think they sent their luggage on ahead? I asked. I don't see how, Sandy replied. Iota would have taken our luggage if there was some sort of portal system. I was able to check our messages before we left, and they didn't mention anything about packing and sending our stuff early. She gestured to the other side of the gazebo where a portal had just formed. Another house is arriving. Let's keep an eye on them and see what they do. Oeda and the other woman greeted the head of household and organized the guest, stepping through. It seemed to involve a lot of drama, with lots of well wishes, final hugs, and a few dashing back and forth through the portal because they forgot something. Finally, everyone was at the gathering they needed to be, and the gathering and the orientation started. I'd kept an eye on them the whole time, and at no point did they bring any luggage either. I looked at Sandy and she just shrugged. I have no idea. We'll figure it out for next time. She gestured at all the other groups here with their fancy outfits in easy manner. I know we look like novices, but that's because we are. We'll have opportunities to ask questions, and the next time we'll be more prepared. This time, though, we're going to stand out a bit, and that's okay. Another group of house guests had reached the oval, so we turned to watch. This time, it had a dragon Chinese Dragon Festival theme. The lead person pulled out a giant papier-mâché dragon head and put it on. Then the rest of the dragon body formed behind it, and more people ducked inside to become the legs and get it moving. An illusionary crowd formed with buildings and stalls, and soon the dragon was doing all kinds of acrobatics to make its way through the crowd. At one point, the dragon ran up a wall, then slack-lined across a string of lights to another building. The acrobatics and balance the house guests inside the dragon were displaying was insane. If that had been all they did, I would have called it a success, but the lighting grew more vivid and the dragon morphed. It grew in size and turned into a real Chinese dragon, with 4 legs, a long tail, and whiskers that squirmed like snakes. It roared and attacked the crowd, smacking down a few festival goers before they could escape. All seemed lost until a trio of warriors appeared, decked out in ancient Chinese armor and wielding long spears. The battle was on, and it changed from being a light-hearted festival battle to a real deadly fight. The dragon tried to smash them down and eat them. Spears broke. The dragon bled from multiple wounds, and 2 of the trio went down before the final warrior landed the killing blow. When he did, the scene switched back to being fun and playful again. The dragon exploded in a fountain of gold coins and brightly wrapped packages. They soared really high, and when they showered down, it was over a much larger radius than just the oval. The other houses got in the action too, as they jumped in the air and cast spells to catch all the sparkly loot before it hit the ground. I think their act had taken too long, as the caller announced the next house as soon as it was quiet enough. This time the house guests climbed aboard a cloud and floated away. The line moved forward. We moved with it. There was only one more group in front of us, and then it would be our turn. We had now been here for a few minutes and knew what to expect. Now we had been here for a few minutes and knew what to expect. We felt more relaxed. We spent our time chatting about the house, the gardens, and the other house guests. As I was pointing out items of interest, it turned out my sight was a lot better than Sandy's. I'd lost my natural sight for a few weeks when I had my face punched in by a golem. My supernatural healing had kicked in, and I'd grown a whole new set of eyeballs. I hadn't been very happy about it at the time, but now it seemed like my sight was just perfect. Actually, it was better than perfect. I could see amazing detail at long distances, as well as see in the dark. Since this whole realm stayed permanently night, it was turning out to be a nice advantage. Annabeth and I had played a fun game of I Spy back in Louisville, and my sight was much better than hers. Sandy had been a supernatural for a long time, though, and I thought her vision would be perfect, too. It turns out she could see the oval pretty clearly, but there were a lot of little details with the house that she was missing. The next set of house guests made it to the oval, and this time they didn't do anything fancy. Instead, they just grouped up and sang like a choir. I had no idea what the actual words were, as it was in a different language. The tone was upbeat and yet wistful, sort of like Africa by Toto. They did an excellent job, and it made a nice contrast to the magic-heavy acts that had gone before. There was a smattering of applause, and then the caller announced the next house. House Atac is proud to welcome House Perth. This time a troop of kangaroos showed up. They had on saddles bejeweled with diamonds and pearls. They were right in front of us, so I got a good look at that as the house guests' outfits flared with light, and suddenly they were decked out with diamonds and pearls too. Whoever had made their outfits was an artist. There was just enough diamonds to make it sparkle, but they used the symmetry of the pearls to give it texture and flow. I've always liked pearls, and these costumes were beautiful. I didn't get to admire Perth's outfits long before they vaulted into the saddle, waved at the other houses, and hopped off. We moved forward, and this time we were at the front of the line. The caller gave us a smile, looked us over, and then looked us behind us. Not seeing anybody, he looked at us again and cocked his eyebrow in question. "It's just the 2 of us," Sandy explained. "Our house is under attack, and this is all we could spare." "House name?" the caller asked politely. House Louisville, Sandy said. Ah, you are the new house. Yes. He gave us an even bigger smile. Sandy nodded. Then I bid you welcome. Welcome to House Atac. It will not be the same as being in your own home, of course, but we will do everything we can to make you as comfortable and inviting as possible. His voice boomed out in genuine happiness to see us. His manner was so infectious that I felt my nervousness disappear, and I actually felt like they were happy to see us. This is the first time for both of you, yes? Yes, it is, Sandy smiled back. To be honest, we were a bit nervous about coming here, but you and Annoita have made us feel truly welcome. I'm happy to be here, and now I'm feeling excited too. I remember my first time, the caller said wistfully. It is such a magical experience. He stared off in the distance for a moment, lost in happy thoughts, then focused on us again. I know you will have a wonderful time. If there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable, please let us know. He touched his purple star. Be sure to go to the cocktail social tonight. The drinks will be delicious and it will be the best time to meet your fellow guests. Finding friends here will make your visit much more enjoyable. After all, life is better when you're laughing with friends. He followed this up with a booming laughter and slapped Sandy on the shoulder like they had been drinking together, and he just told a great joke. For anyone else, it would have been offensive. Too much, too soon. But with him, it felt just right. The caller was the type of person that had never met a stranger. If you talked with him, then you were his friend. We paused as another house had made it to the oval. They sat down on their chairs that just appeared, and then they all took harps out of the air. The harps were all different sizes, from massive harps that were bigger than you'd see in an orchestra all the way to the smaller handheld ones like you see on Greek poetry. They started playing and it sounded like the wind blowing through trees filled with hundreds of wind chimes. It didn't have any sort of melody or beat like I was used to, but it set the mood. An illusion formed overhead of a forest. We zoomed into a grove of trees, then just one branch, then just one tree, then just one branch where a mama bird sat on her nest. She was tiny, with a white belly and brown on top. She sort of looked like a little sparrow, but with a longer tail. She moved and we zoomed in on an egg which cracked and a little bird started to appear. It was awkward and wet for a little while, but soon it dried off, flapped its scrawny wings, and was ready for food. We followed the little bird as it got food, got stronger, and finally left the nest. It found some seeds of its own, then had a fun chase with a little insect. The music flew with the chase, and I thought it would be the end of the show as it ate the insect and soared into the sky. But out of nowhere, a hawk dove down and struck the sparrow. It pinned it to the ground and started to tear at it with its large beak. I looked at Sandy in shock as the scene faded. The chairs and harps disappeared and the group moved on. This is a common theme with supernatural stories, Sandy said quietly. Almost every supernatural knows someone who'd lost their life in a fight against someone stronger. We are immortal, but we die pretty easy too, so lots of the stories told are tragedies. I get what you're saying, but I still think the story would have been better if it ended when the sparrow soared into the sky, I grumbled. We are used to modern movies and books, most of which have some sort of happy ending, but it's only been recently that the overall life for mortals have gotten better. If you go back a couple hundred years, people died all the time for all kinds of reasons. The old songs and tales from that times were mostly tragedies too. Someone falls in love, their love dies in a war or at sea, and they throw themselves off the cliff to go join them. Usually it has a pretty melody but macabre lyrics. When you consider that most of the supernaturals here are older than me, it makes sense they would stick with the tragedy as their theme. I nodded in agreement. I'm sure if I lived long enough, I'd see all kinds of tragedy in my life. I still liked happy endings, though. Just because life is dark doesn't mean you can't be the light. Are you ready? The caller asked. Sandy looked at me and I nodded. Yes, we are, she said firmly. Very well, then. The caller stepped back so he wouldn't blow out her eardrums. For the first time, he bellowed, House Atac is proud to welcome House Louisville. Everyone stopped chatting and moving and turned to look at us. As a house and as a people, this is their inaugural gathering. Let us show them the kindest greeting and the warmest acceptance. His voice made it all the way to the house and echoed back to us as the sound of applause quickly gathered. I looked back at all the people in the gazebo. They smiled and clapped, and a few even gave me a cheerful wave. I still felt so much like a novice and a poor country bumpkin as I grabbed the handle on my suitcase and began wheeling down the garden path with Sandy. We didn't glide or float or ride away. Instead, we just simply walked, dragging our spare clothes behind us. The applause didn't stop. If anything, it got louder, and a few whistles and cheers broke out. I thought I would feel small and a little embarrassed. Instead, the sounds of the other house guests lifted me up. I found I was smiling as Sandy started waving at the other groups. I started waving too. I felt wonderful, excited, and happy. This was an adventure. I didn't know these people, but we had the house in common, and that was enough. With a light heart and a firm step, we headed down the garden path. The night air was beautiful, and the path was easy to walk on, so we just enjoyed the spectacle for a while. This was certainly the most magical night I'd experienced so far, and I was glad we were doing this together. With all the displays of power and pageantry of it all, I felt like this was a fairy tale. And so ends chapter 2. So in the next chapter, we are going to be walking down the path, and we're going to have a discussion about what we're going to be doing in the oval. So that will be very exciting. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'm not a professional reader, so I was kind of stumbling over some of it, but I know you all got the great idea. But anyway, thank you for joining me, and I will see you again for chapter 3. Thank you.